You Lose by Kristian L, 12th grader at Mott High School. Where is my eye? The faint voice of a woman seemed to echo through the halls, only slightly above a whisper. Jack perked up from his seat at the voice, listening for it to come again. When it didn't, he brushed it off as his imagination and continued to eat his soup as he sat in the dining room. Beef stew, his favorite. Chunks of hearty meat and healthy vegetables, a special recipe his mother always made for dinner before she left for work. Jack scooped another spoonful into his mouth, scraping his teeth against the utensil as he got a perfect bite of tender meat with soft potatoes and carrots. He chewed slowly. The warm broth was smooth and comforting. The taste could only be described as nostalgic for him as he savored the spices on his taste buds. Odd, he thought out loud. He chewed once more, feeling the strange texture grind against his molars. It was tough but squishy, like a hard piece of gum. Where is my eye? The voice came back, no longer a whisper he could ignore, but screeching violently this time. It startled the boy in such a way he choked on the bite in his mouth. He heaved, coughing the meatball into his palm. He reeled from the choke, his eyes watering. They soon focused, and he could now see what he was holding. The circular object was torn from the abuse it suffered from his teeth and caved in on one side. But the blue-colored iris was enough indication. Jack screamed out in horror, flinging the eye from his hand. His sudden reaction caused him to bump the table, and the bowl with brown broth tipped over onto the surface, spilling all of its contents. What usually was beef was now chunks of stewed human flesh. Jack fell from his chair, hyperventilating from shock. Suddenly, he could hear bare feet on the wooden floors approaching the dining room. "You ate my eye!" The screech returned. The boy stumbled and ran towards his room down the hall. He scrambled to find a hiding spot as the footsteps quickened to a run. Jack slid under his bed, tucking each of his limbs so they were out of sight. He closed his eyes tight as the booming voice of the strange woman started again. "Where are you?" The sound of her shook him to his core, trembling throughout his body, and the fear settled in his spine, paralyzing him. For a moment, it was silent, so he felt brave enough to take a peek. He was met with the sight of a decaying foot. It had missing toes and infected holes where her flesh began to peel off. He almost couldn't hide his gag. The further up he looked, the more decomposed, discolored, and stretched skin he could see. Jack could hear the breath of the woman as she huffed out heavily. The floorboards, or what could have been her back, creaked as she began to bend over to look underneath the bed. The woman was infested with warts and her skin sagged off of her hollow cheeks. She smiled at him. Black and gray gums with only a few rotted teeth hanging on flashed at the trembling boy. It was as if a walking corpse was looking right at him. Drool leaked from the sides of her gaping mouth as she stared at him like a predator would a piece of meat. However, the most disturbing part to Jack was that she had a dark, concaved hole where her right eye would have been. He could see her bony hand reaching out, and he immediately flinched away. Jack scurried from underneath his bed, but was caught by his foot before he could stand. He screamed again, trying to kick her away. The woman climbed over him, hovering over his terrified body. He attempted to fight back, but the petite woman overpowered him. Her mouth hung agape, and drool dripped onto his face, making him cringe back. "I'll make sure you lose yours too." She spoke lowly, replicating her initial whisper. Her bony fingers reached for Jack's green eye, ready to replace her own.